Hello, my name is Piotr and I'm a fashion and commercial photographer based in London. If you want to see some of my personal work, follow the link in the description where you can see a selection of my editorial shoots and commercial projects. In our last video, we took a deep dive into creating detailed wine bottle pack shot setup. We carefully broke down the setup and discussed how to bring out the best in the product's form. This time, we are going to build on those foundational principles while adding some advanced steps to elevate our shoot and create a visually intriguing image. When approaching a product shoot, one of the most critical things is to begin with observation. Carefully examine the product, its shape, material, and textures, and think about how you can use those qualities to your creative advantage. In this example, we are working with a bottle that has a beautiful rounded shape and striking silver lid. What's unique about this product is that it's completely transparent, so the only splash of color comes from the brand's logo, which features a distinctive shade of blue. For this particular shoot, I'm going for a heroic look with the product, so we'll shoot it up close with wide-angle lens, specifically on 24mm. This lens will exaggerate the perspective, making the bottle appear larger and more powerful in the frame. I've also chosen to use a mirror in the set design, which will provide a clean, minimalistic aesthetic, enhancing the overall visual impact of the shot. Now, let's talk about lighting setup. I've decided to start our lighting process by focusing on the background. Personally, I always prefer starting with the background, and I would recommend this approach for most product shoots. Why? Because once you have a solid visual appealing background, it becomes much easier to build your lighting around the product and bring everything together cohesively. In this setup, we want to ensure that we have complete control over our lighting, meaning the background light shouldn't interfere with the product lights and vice versa. To achieve this, we left a sufficient amount of space between the background and the product, creating separation. For this shoot, I'm using a combination of strobe lights and LED with RGB capabilities. I specifically want to incorporate the brand's blue tone into the background, and the LED is perfect for that. I've positioned the LED on the floor with a softbox slightly angled towards the ceiling. This setup creates a beautiful gradient effect on the background where the color softly fades into black, adding depth and intrigue to the image. Let me show you how it looks with just the LED in place. As you can see, now we have a lovely absolute blue gradient on the background. It goes from dark blue to pitch black towards the corners. That makes the bottle stand out and gives us this lovely gradient. One major thing is that on our continuous light, we have put a softbox, which will reduce a lot of power from that light. This is why we set up this light first, just so we can adjust the shutter speed towards the maximum power output of that light. By changing the shutter speed, I could just make it brighter or darker depending on what I want from that image. While the background looks great, we want the product itself to stand out even more. For that, I have set up a Fresnel light in the background that will create a lovely gradient for the back. Let me show you how it looks. As you can see, I've also turned off the modeling light just because we're working with 1/10 of a shutter speed, which will pick up any modeling light in the room, especially if it's targeted at the product. Let me show you how it looks with those two lights together. Beautiful. So what you can see now is that was before and that's now. We can see that the liquid inside is bright and shiny, the background has a beautiful gradient, as well as the nice gradient inside the bottle that kind of feathers into dark contrasty edges. I do have a little bit of adjustments here. As you can see before, I did match color hue of the image to slightly more absolute blue than it initially was. But other than that, we might have just a little bit more contrast because it's a raw file, but that's pretty much it. Once we are happy with the background lighting, it's time to move on to lighting the product itself. I always start with the edge light as it defines the product silhouette and gives it that sharp professional look. For this, I'm using a 45-degree dish combined with a diffusion panel. In the last video, I explained how to position your lights by thinking about it like a game of billiards. To make this even easier, I'll show you a technique of using a phone torch or a laser pointer. In this example, we want our highlight to show up on the far edge of the product. I'm going to use my phone torch to find the angle of reflection. When you move your phone torch around the product, you can see how it's interacting with its reflective surface. If we want the highlight to show up on the edge of the bottle, we can quickly figure out it needs to come on this angle. Accordingly, we'll move our phone further out that way to see where the highlight needs to be on our panel, And then here we go. We can see it needs to be around this area. With that, we know that we can go on the other side of that diffusion panel and set the dish in the right position. And here it is. We'll set our modeling light on so you can see it, and we can see our highlight roughly where our phone help us figure it out. We'll turn off the modeling light again just so it doesn't disturb our image. As you can see, it's set up quite close to our diffusion panel, pretty much almost touching the diffusion panel. That'll give us a nice sharp edge of the gradient that smoothly feathers across the rest of the highlight. Let's see how it looks. Because we set up that light in a correct position, we see that smooth gradient coming across that image. This part here, that sharp edge, is the actual dish touching the diffusion panel. And as you can see, it feathers away, giving this roundness and also contour to the bottle. Not only that, but we can also see some nice highlight on the lid and the neck of the bottle. This is very important because that will make the bottle silhouette stand out even more from the background. So the edge light is done now. Let's move on to the second side light. This one will help us define how round the bottle is. Let me show you how we're gonna do it. Earlier, I have set up a strip here that will help us show how rounded the bottle actually is. In difference to the edge light, the softbox is set up a little bit closer to the camera, or slightly less behind the actual product. Because of that, we'll see the highlight appear a little bit closer to the center of the bottle. Because the strip is longer than the dish, it will highlight a little bit more evenly across the bottle. As you can see, the highlight pretty much reaches the bottom of the bottle, while with the dish we can only see it on the top. I think it's a good combo together, and I like that they're not perfectly symmetrical, allowing us to see the shape of the bottle even better. Next, I would like to add an overhead light. That will help us highlight the edge of the lid of the bottle, as well as the portrait of Lars Smith. Let me show you how we're gonna do it. Before, I've set up an overhead light with a magnum reflector on it. It is set up purposefully off-center just to minimize the reflection of the actual light in the portrait. What you need to know about this part is that it's flat, and because of the angle of reflection from the camera, whatever is going to be directly overhead above the product is going to perfectly reflect and flood the portrait with light. Let me show you how it looks once we turn off the modeling light so it doesn't affect our shot. And here is the result. Firstly, we see a highlight on the edge of the lid. I think that looks great. Another thing is the actual portrait. Before, it was pretty much a dark silhouette, but now we can appreciate it a little bit better. And finally, there's a little bit more light on the front. As you can see, it's a small yet big addition to the actual shot. It mainly works on the details. It changed majority around the lid, the portrait, and a little bit of bottom of the bottle. It is a very important but small change that we are making here. The final touch is obviously lighting the actual Absolut logo. We cannot leave that dark, so there's a solution for that. Because it would be very tricky to light the logo without affecting all of the other lights, we'll need to take an asset. Asset is an additional image that we take just to be used in post-production to composite on top of our main image. Let me show you how we're gonna do it. So earlier I have set up a light to the side that we're gonna place behind the product. We'll have it angled slightly above the camera, and with the help of whiteboard, we'll reflect the light at the product's logo here. And let's see the result. As you can see, the bounce card reflected all of the light into the center of the Absolut label. The amazing thing we can do is mix this with this, ensuring that certain parts of the logo are actually dark, but the middle bit is bright, creating a lovely gradient for the front. If we choose to have it any brighter or any darker, it's as simple as changing the power of the backlight. Let's say we would want it a little bit brighter. We are 5.4 now. We're going to go 0.6 up to full 6 stops of power. And that way, we'll have even more defined reflection on the text. That's perfect. I might keep both and decide later how I'm going to composite it in post-production. And that's it for today. I hope the breakdown has been helpful and has given you insight into creative and technical process behind a product shoot. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more videos like that, please give me a follow. I'm going to be talking about the history of photography, practical experience, and my personal projects.